one of those opening lines that doesn't just start a song, it stops time. In a decade fueled by grunge, glam, and thunderous rock riffs, a soft-spoken ballad rose out of nowhere like a hand on your shoulder in the middle of a storm. To Be With You wasn't supposed to be a hit. It wasn't flashy. It didn't come with leather, smoke, or big-budget music videos, but it had something the world didn't even know it was aching for: sincerity. And at the heart of it all was a voice. A voice that didn't just sing, it reached people. It comforted them. That voice belonged to Eric Martin, frontman of Mr. Big. And yet, as the song rocketed to #1 in 15 countries, as it echoed from bedrooms to arenas to dusty cassette players around the globe, very few listeners ever paused to ask, who is this man? He wasn't the typical rock star. He didn't chase headlines or scandals. He chased moments, real ones, human ones. And because of that, or maybe in spite of it, the industry barely knew what to do with him. Eric Martin became the voice of one of the biggest songs of the 90s, but somewhere along the way, the man himself faded into the background. So what happened? How did someone with so much range, emotion, and raw vocal power, someone respected by legends, end up as one of music's best-kept secrets? This isn't just a story about fame. It's about identity, timing, and what it means to pour your soul into your art, even when the world isn't paying attention. It's time to go back, not just to the hit single, but to the man behind the microphone. This is the story of Eric Martin, the voice that should have been unforgettable. If you love uncovering the real stories behind the voices that shaped music history, hit that subscribe button and join us here on RetroWaves, where legends live on. Long before the stadiums, the charts, and the screaming fans, Eric Martin was just a kid growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area. A wiry, wide-eyed dreamer with music in his blood and a fire in his gut. Born Eric Lee Martin on October 10, 1960, in Long Island, New York, he came from a family that understood rhythm and soul. His father, Frederick Pepper Martin, was a jazz drummer, not a household name, but a respected working musician who passed down more than just technique. He gave Eric something far more valuable: feel. The Martins eventually moved west, and it was in the vibrant, musically rich landscape of the Bay Area that Eric's identity began to take shape. While other kids played football or skateboarded down suburban streets, Eric was in his room, listening, learning, absorbing. His heroes weren't just the rock gods. He worshipped soul singers, crooners, and storytellers: Otis Redding, Paul Rogers, Steve Marriott. Those weren't just voices to Eric. They were blueprints. He didn't want to just hit high notes. He wanted to move people. Even as a teenager, people noticed something different. His voice had this raw, unfiltered honesty. It wasn't about perfection. It was about emotion. He could go from a smoky whisper to a soaring wail in a single breath, and somehow it never felt forced. Friends say he was charismatic, but not flashy. He had this quiet confidence, a kind of grounded ambition. He believed in his talent, but he didn't feel entitled to success. He knew he'd have to earn it. By high school, he was already fronting local bands, writing songs, and dreaming bigger than his surroundings. But it wasn't fame he chased. It was connection, the kind you feel when a lyric hits you at just the right moment, and for 3 minutes, you're not alone. Eric Martin wasn't born to be a pop star. He was born to sing his truth, whether 5 people were listening or 5 million. And from the very start, it was clear. This kid had a voice that wasn't meant to blend in. By the late 1970s, Eric Martin was chasing his dream full-time, playing gigs across the Bay Area, living for the stage, and quietly learning the brutal rules of the music business. He wasn't just another pretty voice in tight jeans. He was a frontman, the kind who gave it everything, even if the crowd was half empty and the sound system barely worked. His early days were filled with near misses and underdog moments. Eric cut his teeth in local bands like Kid Courage and 415, singing with a soulfulness that didn't always fit the moment's musical trends. This was the era of punk and arena rock, but Eric sang like a man from another time, more blues club than mosh pit. And while his talent was undeniable, the industry didn't quite know where to put him. Labels told him he was too soulful for rock and too rock for pop. The compliments were always followed by, "but not right now." In 1982, he finally landed a solo deal and released his debut album, Eric Martin, followed by I'm Only Fooling Myself in 1983. Both albums were filled with rich vocals and well-crafted songs, but they didn't make the commercial splash he'd hoped for. Part of the problem? Poor promotion, industry politics, wrong place, wrong time. But Eric didn't stop. He kept gigging, touring, singing backup on other artists' records, and collaborating wherever he could. He was a voice for hire, a journeyman, admired by insiders but invisible to the mainstream. Behind the scenes, he was gaining a reputation as a singer's singer, the kind of guy other vocalists respected and feared. Still, the grind took its toll. He watched peers rise to stardom while he stayed in the shadows. He questioned everything, his style, his image, his decisions. There were rumors that certain execs saw him as too clean to market. He didn't have the sleaze, the drama, or the dark backstory labels craved in the late 80s rock scene. One A&R man allegedly told him, "You're too nice for this business." And there were whispers, too, that Eric could be stubborn in the studio, that he wouldn't compromise on vocal takes or lyrics, that he fought for the music too hard. But the truth was simpler. He had integrity, and he wouldn't fake who he was just to chase a trend. Financially, things got rough. Touring paid little. The solo albums flopped. And Eric, despite his voice, his looks, his work ethic, still wasn't marketable enough for mainstream radio. He was close, always so close, but never quite over the line. By the end of the 80s, Eric Martin was in danger of becoming a nearly man. The guy with the golden voice, remembered only in liner notes and dusty record crates. But fate, and a call from a certain bassist named Billy Sheehan, was about to rewrite everything. When To Be With You exploded in 1991, it felt like a miracle. A song Eric had written years earlier, a raw, heartfelt ballad about longing and heartbreak, had suddenly gone global. Mr. Big was everywhere. MTV radio, magazine covers. For a moment, Eric Martin was no longer almost famous. He was finally, undeniably, there. But fame has a strange sense of humor. As the lights got brighter, so did the shadows behind them. To Be With You was so big. It was almost too big. It dwarfed everything else Mr. Big had built. Their hard rock roots, their technical musicianship, their louder, heavier side. And for some critics, the band became a punchline. "Oh, that's the group with the sappy ballad." For Eric, it was a double-edged sword. The song had made him a household voice, but not a household name. Worse, it painted him into a corner. Labels now saw him as a ballad guy, a soft rock singer, not the gritty, versatile frontman he actually was. They wanted more To Be With You, but not the rest of him. Behind the scenes, pressure mounted. The band's next singles didn't chart as high. Internally, tension brewed. Members of Mr. Big came from very different musical worlds, and as expectations from the label grew, so did the strain. There were creative disagreements, management missteps, and growing frustration over how they were being marketed. Eric also struggled emotionally. He had waited years to break through, and now that it had happened, he felt misunderstood. The world knew the song, but not the man behind it. There was a quiet pain in that, like being famous for the wrong reasons. He tried returning to his solo roots, but momentum was gone. Grunge was taking over. Labels were slashing artists left and right. And by the late 90s, Mr. Big disbanded, worn out, underpromoted, and pushed aside by a changing industry. Eric was back to square one. Only this time he had something he didn't before. A #1 hit that haunted him more than it helped. But the story doesn't end in silence, because for Eric Martin, the spotlight never defined him. The music did. To Be With You didn't start in a studio. It started in a bedroom. Eric Martin wrote it in his early 20s, back when he was just another kid chasing girls, chasing gigs, and trying to make sense of heartbreak. The song was personal, even a little awkward, like a love letter you were never meant to send. It was inspired by a girl he knew back in high school, someone who always seemed to fall for the wrong guys, while Eric stood in the background. It was a quiet kind of desperation, tender, raw, and painfully relatable. He kept the song tucked away for years, unsure if it was even good. It was too soft for the clubs, too vulnerable for the rock scene. But something in it felt true, and truth has a way of resurfacing. Fast forward to the early days of Mr. Big. The band, a supergroup of sorts, was known for their technical chops. Billy Sheehan on bass, Paul Gilbert on guitar, Pat Torpey on drums, and Eric's powerhouse vocals tying it all together. They leaned hard into hard rock, fast riffs, loud drums, big solos. And then, during a break in rehearsal, Eric played that song, stripped down on acoustic guitar. No distortion, no theatrics, just the melody and that pleading voice. Something shifted in the room. Billy Sheehan later said they knew it was special right away. Still, when it came time to record their second album, Lean Into It, To Be With You was treated almost like an afterthought. They recorded it quickly. No one expected it to be the lead single. It was just there. But radio had other plans. A few DJs started spinning it, unprompted, and the response was immediate. Phones lit up. People were requesting it non-stop. Within weeks, it was climbing the charts. Within months, it was #1 in over 15 countries, including the US, Canada, and across Europe and Asia. Eric's voice, soft, sincere, different, had cut through the noise of the era. It didn't sound like anything else on the radio, and that's exactly why it worked. To Be With You became more than a hit. It became a moment, a vulnerable anthem in an age of excess. And for Eric Martin, it was proof that the quietest songs can sometimes speak the loudest. After To Be With You hit #1, Mr. Big was suddenly a global name. But the real shock wasn't just how high the song climbed, it was where it soared the highest. In the United States, the band had a solid fan base and brief mainstream glory. But overseas, especially in Japan, the Philippines, Korea, and Southeast Asia, Mr. Big became something else entirely. They were megastars. We're talking sold-out arenas, crowds chanting lyrics in perfect English, airport mobs, magazine covers, wall-to-wall screaming fans, the kind of Beatles-level mania that most American rock bands never dreamed of achieving outside their own country. And at the heart of it all was Eric Martin, the voice they called the romantic rock prince. In Japan, Mr. Big wasn't just respected, they were revered. Their technical musicianship aligned with Japan's love for precision and artistry, while Eric's emotional, bluesy vocals struck a deep chord with audiences hungry for real feeling in their music. He had the rare gift of making a stadium feel like a living room. No matter how big the crowd, it always felt personal. They recorded multiple live albums specifically for Japanese audiences, including Live at Budokan, where tens of thousands of fans sang every lyric back to them. Eric would later call Japan his second home, and he meant it. Fans there didn't just know his hits, they knew his story. They followed his solo projects. They came to see him, not just the band. And while Mr. Big's popularity began to fade in the U.S. after the early 90s grunge wave, their international fame kept surging. In fact, when most American listeners assumed the band had quietly disbanded, Mr. Big was touring across Asia, performing in front of massive audiences, releasing new albums, and remaining a dominant name on radio and television. But here's the irony. The same industry that told Eric he wasn't cool enough for the U.S. market watched in disbelief as his uncool honesty turned him into a legend halfway across the world. He didn't have to play the part of a rock god. He just had to be himself, and fans overseas loved him for it. Eric Martin may never have been the poster boy of American rock, but in the eyes of millions, especially across Asia, he was a voice of hope, heartbreak, and truth, a voice they never forgot. For all the stadium lights and screaming fans, Eric Martin was often alone. The truth behind the spotlight is that fame rarely travels with balance, and while Eric was soaring across continents, waving to sea after sea of cheering crowds, back home, real life was slipping quietly through his fingers. Eric has always been open about one thing. He loves being on stage, but loving the stage came with a price. Life on the road isn't glamorous, it's grueling. Constant touring meant waking up in a new city every other day, long flights, brutal schedules, and a clock that never stopped ticking. He missed birthdays, he missed holidays, he missed moments that never came back. He once said in an interview, "You come home and your kids feel like strangers. They've grown an inch, their voices have changed, and you were somewhere else when it happened." Eric eventually got married and had a family, but maintaining that bond while juggling the chaos of an international career was no easy task. The pressure to stay relevant in an ever-changing industry was relentless. One wrong move, one album that didn't chart, could mean losing it all. And then came the internal doubts. He had everything he'd dreamed of, a hit song, adoration, critical respect, but it didn't feel the way he thought it would. There were nights, even after playing to tens of thousands, when he sat in a hotel room and wondered, do they love the music, or do they really see me? And while Eric was never the tabloid type, rumors quietly circled over the years. Tensions with bandmates, moments of burnout, regrets over missed opportunities in the States. The music industry had changed by the 2000s, faster, colder, more disposable. Artists were expected to be brands. Algorithms mattered more than artistry. And for someone like Eric, who wore his heart on his sleeve, it was a world that no longer fit. But despite the pressure, the distance, and the emotional toll, Eric Martin never stopped showing up, because at his core, he wasn't doing this for fame or fortune. He was doing it for that feeling, the one you get when someone tells you, "That song saved me." He sacrificed a lot to keep that connection alive, and through it all, he kept singing, not just because he had to, but because it was the only way he knew how to stay true to himself. As the world changed, as rock gave way to pop, then to digital, and then to algorithms, Eric Martin kept singing. He didn't chase trends, he chased truth. Long after Mr. Big's original run wound down, Eric leaned into what he did best, connecting through music. He released solo albums, some rock, some acoustic, some deeply personal. He toured relentlessly, especially across Japan and Southeast Asia, where fans greeted him not as a nostalgia act, but as a living legend. His later work didn't top charts, but it didn't need to, because Eric's voice had already found its home, not on Billboard, but in the hearts of the people who grew up with him and never let go. Over the years, he reunited with Mr. Big for several tours, and every time the crowds returned. Older, perhaps, wiser, but still holding on to the memory of what his music had once meant, and still meant. Eric Martin never stopped appreciating it. In interviews, he's humble, grateful, sometimes even surprised that people still care. But the truth is, the world never stopped caring. They were just waiting to be reminded. And when he sings today, with that same soulful rasp, that same quiet fire, it's not about proving anything, it's about sharing something. Eric once said, "If one person feels what I felt when I wrote the song, then it was worth it." He may not have the fame of a Springsteen or the headlines of a rock and roll wild child, but what he does have is rarer, a voice that never lied, a story that never sold out, and a legacy that still echoes across oceans, generations, and hearts. Maybe you heard "To Be With You" on a long road trip. Maybe it was on a mixtape someone made you in high school. Or maybe, like so many others, that voice came to you at just the right moment and somehow made everything feel a little less heavy. Eric Martin didn't chase the spotlight, but he lit up the world just the same. His voice, honest, aching, timeless, still lingers in the spaces between memory and melody. And for those who were listening, it never went away. What's your favorite Mr. Big memory? Was it a concert, a cassette, or that one moment "To Be With You" helped you feel seen? Share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear it. And if you love iconic voices, timeless songs, and the real stories behind music's unsung legends, like, subscribe, and ring that bell. This is RetroWaves, where legends live on.